Hello, welcome to another episode of Executive Suite. I'm your host, Thomas Braun. Today we'll be interviewing Eddy Arriola, the author of a new business book called It's All About Relationships. Eddy is a seasoned entrepreneur, CEO, board member, and advisor to CEOs. He's known for building successful companies and guiding leaders through moments of growth, transition, and transformation. He's also the founder and former chairman and CEO of Apollo Bank, which launched during the great financial crisis and grew into one of the most respected banks in the Southeast, ultimately completing a successful exit to a publicly traded company under his leadership. Stick around because later on, Eddy's going to share with us some of the things he wish he had known when he was just starting out. Here we go. Here we are today with Eddy Arriola, the author of a new book called It's All About Relationships and Mastering the Art of Relational Leadership. Eddy, thank you for coming on to the program. Can you please tell us about your book? I noticed to start with, it was structured with two parts.
Yeah.
You've got part one and part two. Tell me about that and why you decided to structure it that way.
Yeah. Well, somewhere along the way, I started interacting with different CEOs that were looking to start a business and build a business through my background as a advisor to companies and as a bank CEO. And one of the things I kept saying over and over was the problems that leaders had what weren't related to finance or strategy or operations. Where they usually got stuck was their interactions with other people, that they just didn't have the right relationships in place to solve a problem. And I saw that my success never came because I was sort of a superhero that was able to do everything on my own, but I got things done through other people. That was my superpower. So as I started working with different CEOs and entrepreneurs, I wanted to find a way to teach them and sort of convey and just not by giving advice, but by telling stories. So I broke out that sort of the first part of the book is like what I call sort of the six arenas that any leader needs to address. And it's, you know, your team, your what I call your bosses, your collaborators, your community, of course, your customers, and yourself. And I think you have to sort of master those six different relationships in order to accomplish your goals as a leader. And then the second part is a very practical sort of framework, what I call the Carpe framework, and it's CARPE. C is the relationship, like the Carpe Diem, and it's just a very practical way of managing relationships. And Carpe stands for connect, align, respond, prioritize, and evaluate. And it's a whole sort of cycle of, and in the book, it provides some key takeaways and some audits and a bunch of different tools to help people just sort of get better at dealing with people. And most importantly, dealing with the right people and focusing your energy on the people that are really going to help you accomplish your goals.
Yeah. Well, one thing I thought was that the book really applies to every industry
Yes.
and just about every size of company.
Yes.
And there aren't a lot of different areas of business that really can say that. Like if you were to read a book on, finance or marketing or whatever, it's not necessarily as applicable to everyone as this
That's
one
right.
is.
That's right. People issues are, doesn't matter how big or small the company is. I've advised publicly traded, multi-billion dollar corporations with thousands and thousands of employees. And I've been a part of, three-person companies. And a lot of the issues are the same, and it relates to people or not reaching out to the right people, avoiding certain conversations, and not really sort of planning for the long term in terms of who do I need to build a relationship with now, considering where I need to be or I want to be, say 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And, and any CEO and entrepreneur needs to take that into consideration. Sort of what's the end goal and who are the people that are going to help me along the way? Who I need to sort of align myself in order to get there? Because one thing I repeat over and over is you can't do it alone.
One thing I liked about the part one with the on the relationships was that besides having practical advice and a lot of interesting anecdotes,
Yeah.
you talk about the implementation of this. So it's one thing to give people advice, general advice on relationships, but how do you actually implement that in your life? And
Yeah.
so you talked about meetings
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, and having a rhythm and a cadence to it,
Yeah.
regularity. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So in putting this together, and again, from my experience advising different companies, again, as a banker or advisor, or as an entrepreneur, is that no one wants advice or they don't take advice. What they do sort of learn from is either shared experience. Let me tell you my experience. Let me tell you what happened to me, and then you take the lesson that you think is the right one for you and how it might apply to you, or you tell them stories about other people. And in the book, I use a lot of stories from real businesses or sports or popular culture to sort of convey a message. And then I give, real tools that I've used. So as you mentioned, one of the ones, and I feel that in how you build relationships with team members is by having a regular cadence that they know when they will have the opportunity to meet with you and talk to you. And I give the reader, the leader, sort of a framework so that when you go into a meeting, you don't have to think about things. You follow my playbook and what I laid out in terms of how you run a meeting, either with your key executives or one on one, and you can get through the day. And the way the book is structured is that I know leaders are busy. I know entrepreneurs are overwhelmed. I don't want them to have a 400-page sort of you know Bible looking type of text sitting by their bedside that they'll never read. It's a pretty easy to read 200-page book that if you only read 2 pages or 3 pages at a time, there should be at least one, if not two tools that you can take and implement that day or the next day and help you just be a better leader and a better communicator. And hopefully that's what you saw when you read the book. And I do that through stories and practical tools that I've used and implemented, and I've gotten very positive feedback.
The advice you have is for people to have a lot of meetings and to stay in touch with a lot of different people, and not just people inside their company, but people outside their company. And I'm just wondering about the time management.
Yeah.
So, did you actually practice what you preached when you were the CEO of Apollo Bank?
Yeah, I mean, I do it now as an advice, and so part of it is yes, meetings, uh, but really just communication. So there are things that can be done, via phone, via text, uh, via email, if done correctly. I mean, here you and I are doing it, you know, uh, via Zoom. So there are, and that you can use LinkedIn to interact. But it's definitely about communication and being clear, but not to ignore the power of face-to-face human interaction. And especially in this day and age of remote work, I believe a differentiator, a key power that you can use is by having a meeting and sitting down and talking to someone. Um, you can have you can play a recording for to put your kids to bed at night. You can put on an audible book and press play and let someone else read your kid the story, or you can lie down next to them and read it yourself and let them read back and let them, giggle and learn, and you go off in tangent. And I believe that's where, real power, real magic, happen. So it definitely is sort of a long-term approach to success. And it's not a, get rich quick scheme where if, you say these two magic lines and everyone will like you better. That's not what I believe. It's not what this book is about. It's not about, how to make friends and influence people and try to sell someone a used car. It's about how do you build relationships for the long term in order to build a great long-term business and build a great long-term life.
Hmm.
I'm definitely a proponent of um, meeting with people. I mean, if you're going to go to a conference, you know, do the conference right. If you're going to have a meeting, go prepared and do it right. And I talk about a lot of those things, in the book. I mean, one example I recommend at a conference is, having a conference. It's a great way for people in your industry, the influencers, where everyone's in one place. And so the traditional way is, you set up a booth and you wait for people to come by. And what I say is, you almost don't even need to register for, um, for a particular conference. Just find out, what's the headquarter hotel where everyone's meeting, and you sit in the lobby. And before you actually go to the conference, you reach out to 3 or 4 or 5 people and you say, uh, can we meet for a drink? Can we meet for coffee? And you find someone and in a very positive way, sort of tag along with them and meet the people that they know. One thing I like to do is not to go to the rubber chicken lunches or, sort of the big 1,000-person buffet dinners. Is say I'm going to find 3, 4, 5 people, find the best restaurant in town, and say I made a reservation at Gibson's Steakhouse in Chicago. Dinner's at 7 o'clock. Why don't you come with me? And feel free to invite a friend or a colleague. And that's how you sort of create great experiences and meet people in a more sort of intimate, memorable experience. So there's right ways to have meetings, and right ways to connect with people. And I provide a lot of that information in the book, and it's worked for me.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think you could save a lot of money too, which is really important for a
Sure.
small business because at a conference, I think my experience is that you meet more people and make more important connections by walking around the exhibit floor rather than sitting at a booth.
Yeah. Yeah. And you try to
Especially,
find.
I was just gonna say, especially when all the best locations get taken by big companies,
Yeah,
and if
especially
you're
if
a
you're a new
small
company.
company, you're like off to the side, you don't get a lot of traffic. You're better off taking your business cards and your brochures and going out into the field, as it were, and meeting people there. And you'd save yourself thousands of dollars not having a booth, not having to bring
Yeah.
all the extra staff and everything else.
Well, I have one client, he runs a digital marketing company, and for him to exhibit at the big conference he wanted to be at, he was gonna get a terrible booth location, but all in it would
Hmm.
have cost him $15,000. And he's like,
Hmm.
"What do I do?" Um, and then he and I had a conversation, and we sort of decided he was gonna invite his best client, who's super well known in the industry, and said, "I'm gonna pay for the ticket and I'll pay for, all the meals." The guy's company was gonna pay for the hotel and airfare. But he goes, "While you're I'll pay for your ticket that your company wouldn't pay for, um, and I'll take you out to nice restaurants. Let's go together." So he was able to have that one-on-one experience with his client. But as he walked around the floor hall, he was able to say, "I'm not here to pitch you something. I'm here with my client." Others were interested in hearing about his client and what they were doing. And he was able to use that as sort of a Trojan horse to meet other people. And
Hmm.
his particular client was just very well known in the industry. So he was sort of tagging along and gaining credibility because of this client. So instead of spending $15,000, he probably spent $2,500 and had an incredible experience and raised his level of credibility. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's not important to meet 1,000 people. You want to reach the 3, 4, 5 people that are really going to make a difference for
Hmm. Yeah, that's actually an excellent way to go
you. Yeah.
doing it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's actually a really innovative approach.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me to do something like that.
Yeah, and I talk about, so there's a lot of information in the book, but one of the ideas is prioritizing. So I do talk a lot about it, a lot of meetings and reaching out to people. But, once you prioritize it, there's probably 100 people you should, really contact, but
Hmm.
you have to prioritize because you can't contact 100 people. But if you really think about where you want to be, say at the end of the year or in the next 3 years, and you start, who do I need to get me to that place? Is it a particular mentor? Is it I need 3 or 4 more key clients in a certain segment area? Is it that I need a new banking partner? I need to work with my regulator. And as you start to prioritize, you really hone in on a game plan. Well, how do I get them to treat me as a priority? So again, I provide some tips and tactics on how to get there and how to build those relationships and keep them fresh. And there's others that you just, you can't get to, and that's fine. You can't do everything, but prioritization is certainly one of the most important things that you can do in any sort of relationship and in building a business.
Hmm. You also need somebody on the other side who's responsive.
Yes.
Because I was just wondering, do you have anything to say about capital fundraising
Yeah.
relationships?
So, uh, generally, as sort of a broader statement for what you let it is, relationships are a two-way street. So, you can do all the right things and take all the right steps and be super professional, but if the other person is a jerk, or they don't want to have a relationship with you. There's very little you can do. But I've definitely, I use these tools in every aspect of my life, whether it's dealing with my kids when they were in elementary school and dealing with their teachers and administration, um, or in raising capital or selling or buying a company. I really, again, try to take a long-term approach. And if when I've raised capital, it's this person, and I tell people that I advise, you're going to meet with a potential funder or investor. Today may not be the day that they're going to invest because of liquidity issues, because of concentration issues, because of things beyond your control. That and don't take it personal. But there may be a day that they do come back to you, or more importantly, to help you in the short term, they can introduce you to other people. So if you really take, when they say no, that it's not just it's not right now, and you keep that relationship going, and you can, and again, if you've done a good job, say, who else should I be talking to? You've heard me out, you've had some level of interest, you see that I'm serious. Is there someone else that I can talk to? And when I started Apollo Bank during the financial crisis, I met with hundreds of people. I mean, I met with hundreds of people, and I never took it personal when they said no. I assumed it was not the right fit for them, or again, a concentration, or just timing, or liquidity. But I always ask for, well, who else should I be talking? If you're telling me the truth that you think this is an interesting opportunity, who else do you think I should be talking to? And can you make an introduction? So I think that, that's part of, definitely a tool that you can use. And then along with that, the people that say no or not right now when raising capital, and if they seem to be sincere that they had a general interest in what you were doing, I always sort of keep them along. I keep telling them what's happening in the story. So very often I'll send them, hey, we finished our first round of funding. Just wanted you to know, thank you very much for your time. It didn't work out this time, but I'll let you know. And the same work with investors, with banks. Just keep them along for the story so they sort of feel, well, if not financially invested, sort of emotionally invested. And I think that's good advice for almost anyone. Whenever young people will come to me and they'll be looking for an internship before. So I had a friend of the family came to me. He was interviewing for summer internships, and he interviewed with 3 companies. He got one offer. The other 2 didn't extend him an offer just because of different reasons. And I said to the young man, I go, Connor, send the nicest email to those 2 people, that thank them and let them know that you did get an internship. And at the end of the summer, have a summary email and say, again, thank you very much for your time. My internship with this other company went great. Here are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that I learned, and keep them informed that, hey, you're a winner and that you're professional. And now you're even better than when they interviewed you the first time, and keep them informed when you go back to school of when you're coming home, and they might offer you something else when you graduate. So it's really just a few minutes to keep people along in the story. And so I always view it as, I try not to view it as a no. I view it as a not right now. I'm going to keep you along for the story. And that's, again, been my superpower, I believe, in looking back at my career, is taking a long-term approach to things, and not just, moving on to the next thing, but thinking that, I'm part of this big universe in the business world, and I don't know how things are going to play out, and I don't know who can help me down the way. But I'm willing to keep all these balls sort of juggled and see where it ends up.
We're talking about the rhythm and the cadence part.
Yeah.
The setting these meetings up with your staff regularly, weekly, that sort of thing. Can you sort of give us some insights into how that would work in even like a small startup company that has a handful of employees, and the benefits?
Yeah. So I sort of frame it in, I'll call it 3 key meetings that you need to have with your team. And I think, of all the relationships, your team is really what's going to, make the difference in the success of your company. Again, because you get things done, through other people, and they're going to be the ones that create your service offer and your product, and sort of help you scale. In no particular order, but I'll mention what I call what I call the priorities meeting. And that's with your senior leadership team. So if you're a company of 3 people, it's the other 2 people. If you're a company of 25 people or 50. It's your 3 or 4 people that are central. Maybe your head of operations, your head of customer service, and your head of finance. And I believe you have a one time a week meeting, a weekly huddle. That's, it's almost like religion. It's like Sunday church is we're going to get together and we're going to have, it's going to start on time and it's going to end on time, and we're going to treat each other with respect. And you set a very standard, um, agenda. So again, everyone knows what they're doing. And I lay out, you can turn to the chapter, the team's chapter in the book and look up priorities meeting. And it's a playbook of how to run this meeting. And I believe having a playbook and a very standard agenda is not only helpful for the team, so they know exactly what they're getting into and they're not rolling their eyes of, why are we here? But it helps the leader just get organized. If they know that every Tuesday at 10 a.m., this is the meeting, and I know the structure, they can be present. If they're trying to figure out how do I open this meeting and how do they close the meeting, if they have a framework that you always open this way and you always close this way, they can observe the meeting and be an active participant and not really have to worry about some of the mechanics. So that's what I call the priorities meeting, which is one time a week, 1 hour. Starts on time, ends on time. Uh, again, deals with priorities of the business. The second, your key people, I believe it's important to have one-on-one meetings. And there are a lot of people that say, oh, you don't need to do that. But, one-on-one human interaction, I think, is super important. It doesn't have to be an hour a week. It doesn't have to be even an hour a month. But I do think you should have with your key people just check-ins. And as a leader, you want to tell them, keep doing these things or stop doing these things or refocus. You want to make sure that they're always calibrated and headed, in the right direction. And people say, oh, that's overkill. They should know. People don't know. Our minds wander. We have these monkey minds that are always just sort of scattered. Or if they're really creative, they're thinking about new ideas, or they deal with anxiety or pressure differently. And so I do think it's important, uh, to have a one time a week, or, and maybe it works. It depends on the individual. Maybe it's once every other week or it's once a month, but no more than, or rather no less than once a month. And it could just be 15 minutes. And when I tell leaders all the time, I'm like, if you don't know what you're going to say, this is what you do. You tell them, you send an email to the person to tell me your top 3 priorities. And when they email you back, you're like, oh, they're working on the wrong things. Let me tell you what the top 3 priorities are. And when they come in, you want them to give you an update in writing. So you get it ahead of time and you say, keep doing this and stop doing this. And that's as simple as that. In the book, I have a little bit, more of an explanation, but you also want to reinforce certain behaviors. So, I was working with an employee recently and they're just always on, they're just like working, earlier than I am and working later. And I go, Ben, keep doing, I love it when I log into my computer and that you're on board and you've already responded to my emails. And I love it when I'm at dinner and you're sending, like, keep doing that. Like, you don't have to, but I love that you do that. And the other thing was, and I told him, and stop doing it. He would just, panic over the weekend, just start sending emails and panic. I'm like, you don't need to have, like, just take the weekends off. Just don't have that anxiety. You're driving yourself nuts. You're driving me nuts. I'm not going to reply back to you on over the weekend. Stop doing this thing. So, and then the third part is, I think it's really important, the onboarding of an employee. When you have someone new coming to your team, and this could be a vendor, could be, working with an attorney, could be working with an accountant, is invest that time on the onboarding of, here's our clear mission. Here's what success looks like. And then you have some sort of calibration, whether it's mid-year or end of the year, and say, Thomas, you're representing me as an attorney. Our objective was to close this deal, identify new opportunities, and, and let's just say, manage expenses. And at the end of the year, we said, great, we closed the deal. We didn't work on new ones, but we did manage expenses. That's great. So there's always that sort of, calibration, but it's really important at the onboarding, get it right up front, give clear direction. So those are some of the, I think, in terms of managing your team and the people closest to you, you want to have this priorities meeting with a group, one-on-one meetings, keep it simple, but be direct. And the third is really that when you bring someone on, set clear expectations from day one.
Now, a lot of people, in the management advice world, it seemed to at one point almost be sort of like a fad to tell people not to micromanage.
Yeah.
And Yeah, maybe if you have a company with 30,000 employees, you can't anyway. Okay. But for small businesses, I think it's a good idea. I think the more detail that a CEO gets into, the better. There are only so many hours in the day. But what I wanted to ask you about is you were talking about the top level meeting, like um, your functional managers that you're meeting with. But they, in turn, let's say you have someone who's in charge of engineering or chief operations officer, or whatever, and they have like a weekly engineering meeting. You're developing a product or something. How does the CEO attend that meeting without putting that person's nose out of joint? Because my one of my regrets from a company I started up was that I didn't attend the weekly engineering meetings, and at the time I thought, "Well, thank God I don't have to attend these meetings, and that this other person is going to do it for me. He's in charge of it." And things seem to be going all right, and that way I can focus on basically promoting the stock. Like if you're
Yeah.
CEO of a public company, it seems like you spend all of your time promoting the stock. So, but in retrospect, I actually wish I had gone to those meetings. How do you go about doing that if you want to attend the meetings of those people who are subordinate to you, who are running the meeting?
Yeah. So there's two ways. So one way is to do sort of an informal audit, and the informal audit could be, sort of managed by walking around. If your company is big enough and you have a lunchroom, and using the example you gave, the engineering, you see, Sally from engineering, and you're like, "Hey, Sally, how's it going? You guys had your engineering staff meeting. How'd it go? Did Thomas tell you? Did Thomas tell you that we got you know, a new account? Did Thomas tell you that, um, we expanded our line of credit, and we're, taking on new suppliers, or what have you. So you want to see sort of what are the people hearing from your boss, from their boss, which is your direct report. So without being overly intrusive, you want to just sort of, take a taste of the dish that's coming out of the kitchen. And that's one way. And so Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, every year in his annual report, he always highlights, he says that the most important time he spends at the company is going on field sales calls. He'll go to different cities, and he'll go with a salesperson, with a banker, and go on an actual sales call. And he says the most important time is not just at the meeting, but it's the driving to and from the meeting. Because he sees who's trained, who's prepared, what are the things that they're worried about, and sort of like how information is flowing through the company, and are they seeing at the sort of, further down the line, are they seeing the same priorities? So that's certainly one. The second is, you could sit in a random audit of the meeting, and you tell the leader ahead of time. You say, "I know you have this meeting. I just want to sit in here. I'm going to sit back. I'm not going to say anything." And you stick to that commitment, and you really don't say anything. And any feedback you have, you give to that person direct, because you don't want to sort of break the chain of command. Because once you either embarrass a person or call that leader out, they lose all their authority. But hopefully you set the direction that they're, I talk about, again in the book, and I practice this, how I run priority meetings. I always told my management team, I'm like, this is how you should run meetings. Like, do don't reinvent the wheel. If you want to make it better, great, but copy my playbook. And when I talk to your team, I hope they're using the same tools. And some of the tools I use are dashboards and what I call good news, key takeaways. So those, if further down the line, if I'm not hearing those buzzwords, I know that there's a breakdown in communication.
Hmm. Okay. One of the things that you're doing now, post Apollo Bank, is that you're on a number of boards. How do you bring these, skills and concepts to bear when you're on the board of directors? Because on the one hand, the board of directors is sort of the leading group of the whole company.
Yes.
But on the other hand, you don't actually talk to anyone except for the CEO. So, how do you implement these sort of strategies or can you at all as a
So,
director?
yes and no. The primary responsibility of a board member, is governance. So I think it's very important to understand, okay, my role here is not to run the company. It's to protect shareholders and watch out for shareholders and make sure that we're meeting regulatory and compliance guidelines and adhering to the objectives of our shareholders. So it's getting clear on what I'm actually supposed to be doing. I'm not there to be the CEO. The second is to support the CEO in the way that we sort of either negotiating or sort of the understanding. Um, Whenever I have I'm part of a board meeting, and hopefully some of the companies that I'm involved with, they'll see this this podcast and be like, "Oh, Eddie's speaking the truth. He does do this," which is I focus in the actual board meetings on governance and what's right for our shareholders, but any advice or criticism, I'm giving offline. I'm calling ahead of time and saying, "Hey, I saw this report. I have an issue with it. Can we talk about this?" Or after the meeting, be like, "Hey, you called the CFO in and they did a lousy job. I didn't want to call the CFO out, but I don't, the information wasn't delivered in a timely fashion, or it was all sort of spin and no details." I'm not calling them out, and I'm trying to coach the CEO offline, but realizing it's not my job. And so, an example I had, I was at a board meeting the other day, and just so one of the companies I'm involved with was expanding uh, into the banking area in South Florida, and they're like, "Oh, Eddie," and they asked me for my advice in the meeting. They go, "That's great if you can help the individual that they had hired to run that division." And I go, "I'd be glad to reach out to that person and invite him to lunch and help him. But you need to call him and tell him that I'm going to call him for lunch and that they report to you. And whatever they tell me, I'm going to tell you that I'm not there to be, their babysitter, their go between you. I'm here. I report to I'm part of the board, and my responsibility is to the board and to the CEO. I'm not here to manage those individuals." So it's really about understanding the role and doing what I can as an advisor, but not to get confused and that I'm running.
Okay. And couple final questions for you. At the end of the book, you said that when you set out to write a book, you were originally going to write a book on strategy, and that then evolved into relationships. Can you tell me something about that process? How you started off to do one thing and ended up doing another?
Yeah. So even, so I do CEO coaching with CEOs of all different types and sizes of companies across the country. And I'm most formally involved in it with a handful of companies as a board of director meeting, as a board of director. And as I met with these individuals, I'd say, "All right, let's talk about strategy or finance or M&A." And every single conversation would come back to a person issue, or I don't know how to solve that problem because I don't have the right, team members either on my team, or I don't know the right lawyers, or I don't know the right people. And as I would give sort of my experience and share tools, they're like, "How'd you do that?" I'm like, "Oh, well, because this is my framework and this is how I do things." And I realized somewhere along the way that my success has never been because I was the smartest in the room or I had access to the most capital. But I was just really good at building relationships. It was either when I was raising capital or buying companies or selling companies or building out a team. And I just thought that as I started to give that experience, that's what really resonated and what people really needed. So I wanted to come up with a way to coach this and teach this, and that's really why I wrote the book, because I think before anything, leadership is really relational. That a leader leads other people. A leader doesn't come up with the best idea. A leader isn't necessarily the strongest in the room. It's who do people get behind and follow and want to continue to follow. So that was sort of, I started to think about, documenting, how I was successful, how to teach this, how to coach this. And it just really, resonated with people. And again, in this day and age of remote work and AI and everyone's sort of, worrying, I still think it's, before the robots take over, I still think it's, the people have to bond together and work together to build successful companies.
That sounds good. Now, in closing, I just wanted to ask you, is there anything you can tell us, having now gone through the book and thought about all of these issues, that you would have done differently or you regret not doing when you started up Apollo or other startups you were involved
Yeah.
in?
If I can go back in time, sort of talk to uh, the me of 20 years ago, starting, a company, or 30 years ago when I started my first company, I wish I could tell that person, that younger me, and convince that younger me that you can't, you shouldn't, and you can't do it all alone. Rely on other on other people. Be willing to accept ideas, ask for help, and don't try to be Superman. Be just a great team member and assemble a team. And the idea of getting things done through others and coaching them and developing those relationships so that way they want to win together and help you even more, would have caused me a lot less headaches and saved me money and gotten me to my end goal a lot sooner. And I try to remind myself of that every day, that to rely on other people, continue to build relationships, continue to reach out to people, and that it pays tenfold over the long haul.
Okay. Well, want to remind our viewers your book called It's All About Relationships,
Yes.
and it's available on Amazon, and it's available as an ebook you can download onto Kindle. I think as an ebook, it was about half the price as
Yep.
well. It was about, like around
Yeah.
$10 or something, so it's
And
very reasonable.
yeah, and now it's available, literally, as of today. So whenever someone hears this, on Audible and Apple Podcasts. So the Audible book is available now.
Okay, so people could listen to it while they're driving in their
That's
car or
right.
whatever. And so, you don't have to have a lot of money to hire a consultant or a coach. Everybody's got $10. I think it's a good idea to take the time. It's a quick read as well. Um, I think it takes about maybe 4 or 5 hours to
Yep.
read the book.
Yep.
Um, how long is the Audible book? Do you know?
So it took me like 4 days to record it, but it's under 4 hours.
4 hours, okay.
Yeah.
And you're reading it yourself?
I'm reading it.
Okay.
I'm not exaggerating. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done because of all the fits and starts. And I wrote the book, but you forget how hard it is to actually read out loud. So it was a super interesting, challenging process, and I really enjoyed it. So you will hear my voice
Right.
from the actual author.
Right. Okay, good. And so I encourage people to go out and look into this
Yeah,
because
thank you.
and I when I was reading it, I just kept thinking about different people I knew, like clients of mine,
Yeah.
and I wish they would read this part of the book anyway.
That's great.
So anyway,
And you can
because a lot
follow
of
me
it,
on LinkedIn. I provide a
yeah.
lot of a lot of the content on LinkedIn, and be happy to connect to any of your
Yeah,
listeners.
and even if somebody is sort of aware of a lot of these things already, it's kind of like communication skills. It's good
That's
to
right.
have a refresher
That's right.
and
Yeah.
remind
What
yourself about the
what I tell
importance of these
CEOs
things.
and leaders is, you're the besides the CEO, you're also the chief reminding officer. And if you manage team and you manage relationships, you always want to, you really want to repeat yourself. And if you sound like a broken record, you're doing a good job. That you're reminding people of what are the priorities, what's the mission, what are we doing? Because people veer off their path and they get distracted.
Hmm.
Um, and so the book, there's a lot of practical tools and probably reminding people a lot of the things that they already know, and it'll prompt them to take action.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, thank you again for coming onto the podcast and sharing all of this with us.
I really
And
appreciate you're doing a great job. I've enjoyed listening to the podcast and seeing all the different guests you've
well,
had on.
thank you. Okay, well, take care and
Thank you.
bye for now.
Bye for now.